Okay, so now you can see we have all our pattern pieces laid out, and I just wanted you guys to see what it looks like when all the pattern pieces are laid out. Obviously this is a half scale dress form, so the pieces fit neatly on about a yard and a half of fabric. Realistically, this is going to take several yards of fabric in order for you to get your muslin drape. Over here you can see where I made the adjustments to the bodice, and I had to create two separate panels in order to achieve that contoured sweetheart neckline bodice. Again, I just wanted you guys to see exactly what it looked like when the fabric was all laid out together. I'm gonna go in for a couple of the pieces and kind of show you how to do the markings specifically for the pieces, as well as the importance of these lines that you see here. Remember, we discussed a lot about grain lines when we were doing textiles and how important it is to make sure that those grain lines match up. We talked about selvage and crosswise grain and what is the method that I use to sort of lay these patterns out so that the fabric was pulling in the areas where it was supposed to be pulling and laying flat in the areas that it was supposed to stay flat. So again, I just wanted to just briefly show you what it looked like when your patterns are laid out and how they're all going in the exact same direction, following these lines that are created for my lengthwise grain. So now we're going to have a little bit of a closer up view as we go in and we mark the patterns. Okay, now so here you've seen that I've laid out my pattern pieces, and I just sort of cut them into smaller blocks. That way I'm able to just show you in a more focused area. So this is going to be our bodice. So these markings that we made here on the pattern paper, we now need to transfer them to the muslin. So there's a couple of things you should note first. When you're placing your patterns, for example, I placed this pattern on the center front fold. So again, we talk about grain lines. So my selvage is here. So these are the raw edges. If I just sort of pulled away like this, these are the raw edges. And as I'm pulling, I see that the stretch is here, which is where I want it, and there's less stretch here. So that is the reason why I have this red arrow, because it's letting me know that I'm laying it on the proper grain line. And this also lets you know when you have different pieces. For example, if you have a design that has a curve, as you'll see in the lower portion, it lets you know to lay it, no matter how the skirt is slanted, you're still going to follow this grain line so that you know this is exactly, these things should line up nice and evenly. Okay, when it says to cut on the fold, it means just that. You should always have the fabric on the fold, just that area right there. So that way when you're cutting around it, it opens into one piece, and then you'll mark that cut one on fold. Because we separated the bodice into two pieces, you're gonna actually need to cut this 4 times. So before it was once, because you were just doing it all together, but once we divided it, you're gonna need to make a couple of pieces. So this is gonna be cut twice, cut 2 on fold. So 1 is main, 1 is lining, and then you're gonna need 1 for interfacing. So instead of cut 1, it's gonna be cut 2 for interfacing, cut 2 for lining, plus another 2 for the same thing. So it's gonna be left side, right side. So that's why you're gonna do 2. So that's the reason why. Left side, right side. So I just broke this down a little bit more. When I transferred on here, I'm not going to write all this, but I just wanted you to understand why you're cutting 2, because you're doing it for each side. Here you're only going to cut 2 because it's going to fold into one piece, and here you're going to end up with 4 pieces. Okay, all the markings that you have here, you're going to need to transfer them to your actual pattern. So what I use is my carbon paper and my tracing wheel. So this is just that wax paper that we covered in Know Your Tools. And this is what you're going to use as transfer paper. I'm going to use a nice bright one. And I'm going to just cut a little bit off. Again, you have to be very careful with this paper because it can transfer over. So you want to make sure you have just some paper behind it or some fabric behind it so it doesn't rub off onto your table. Okay. So first, actually, I'm going to go in and just cut the entire pattern out. Once I feel pretty good that I have marked everything where it needs to be marked, I'm just going to go in and cut it. I actually ended up purchasing the rotary cutters. I don't know if I covered this before, and it does make a huge difference as far as like cutting your pattern pieces out. It's speedy. It's a lot speedier than you would be able to do it if you just pinned every single piece. You can just do the pattern waist and then just sort of cut around really quickly, and it makes it super speedy. Just for the sake of this lesson, I'm just going to use a regular pair of scissors, but I do recommend getting the rotary cutter because it does make a huge difference if we're talking about speed and efficiency. I wouldn't go to it if you don't feel comfortable, because the thing about scissors, like for example, if I start in here and I realize, you know, I kind of have some room there. If I accidentally snip a little bit of the fabric, rotary cutters is like, as soon as you get going, you're gone. You know, it just pretty much takes on its own, which is the reason why they're great, because they're so quick. But if you don't have a steady hand just yet, it's easier to make a mistake with the rotary cutter. So I'm just going to go in, cut these pieces. Do not unpin until you have all your markings, because it's very difficult to go ahead and get those markings if you have already unpinned your thing, because now you have to go line everything back up, and it's pretty difficult. So what I first do is basically I take my carbon paper, and like I said, because this is a half scale, everything fits neatly. Normally you're going to have to keep moving it around or just get a larger piece of carbon paper. So now I have my tracing wheel, and I'm just going to go ahead. Let me just move these pins a little bit out of the way. Carbon paper right side up. And I can already see, if you can see back here, it's already like rubbing off on it. That's the sucky part about the carbon paper. So yeah, I'm just gonna do it that way. So I'm first going to do my seam allowance line. There it is. Okay, so dart, seam allowance on the side. I'm gonna do the bottom again. The best thing about the tracing wheel is it leaves those little tiny marks, so you can kind of say, if I don't see a tiny mark there, then it looks like I didn't go over that area. So I've gotten, and I'm just gonna do a little dot there. I'm also gonna acknowledge my slashes. So that's letting me know to connect the front bodice to that seam, and this is gonna be my side seam, so I'm gonna make sure I add those in. And then I'm gonna lift the paper and see what that looks like. So for this one, they're pretty faint, but you can definitely see it. And then you can actually go in. I'm just gonna go in and lift this a little bit, because I'm gonna need to slide the carbon paper underneath. So that was to get this side. Now I'm gonna need to get this side, because remember we said right and left. If you're tempted to open it like this and stick it in between, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get two of the same side. So you have to do it on this side, and you have to lift it up and go in there and do it again. So now I'm gonna take my carbon paper and lay it face down. Okay, and just be very careful. Again, we don't want to obstruct the alignment. And then I'm just gonna run it over. One's a little light. All right, I'm gonna be able to put that to the side now and lift this. This is a little more visible than the other one. And then with a pencil or a pen, I'm gonna use a pen for the sake of this, and some of my rulers, I'm just gonna go in and reinforce those lines. So I'm gonna go in, and remember, that's what these notes are for, so you tell yourself, okay, I can't really see that, but it looks like I marked it as 5/8, so I'm just gonna go in and reinforce that. I'm gonna go along here. You can use your ruler, you can do it freehand. I'm gonna reinforce that dart. And then you're gonna do the same thing to this side, because that's gonna give you your 2 pieces. So you're just gonna go in and make the same marking. So I said here was my side seam, here was my front connector. Okay, I'm gonna draw my dot for my dart. I'm gonna say cut 4 interfacing, abbreviate it, cut 4 lining, cut 4 main. I'm just gonna let me know it's a fold over in that direction. And this is it. This is what your markings are going to be. You can also put side seam here so that way you don't get confused. For example, if these pieces looked more like this is more definitive, the difference between the front bodice and the side, but normally if the pieces look very similar and you don't have that side seam, you might end up connecting the pieces wrongly. So now this is our muslin portion versus our pattern portion. And basically what you're now gonna do is go and do that to all your pieces. So all the pieces, I know that's a lot. I mean, this is sewing, this is precision, this is time taking. If you're ever wondering why someone charges so much for a custom garment, these are all, and this is just like the first couple of steps. We haven't gone into more of the construction phase as we will. So again, you're gonna go in now, and for each piece, you're going to go and create all the markings for your muslin, but do not go in and cut them just yet. The next, we're going to show you how to do your tailor's tacks for your garment. Before I actually cut the bottom half of the skirt, the trumpet flare out part of the skirt, I just wanted to show you guys that even though this is on a swing and that this swings out as it should when you're done with the pattern, you're still gonna adhere to that grain line to let you know that the center front fold is still gonna be parallel to this line here, so that you can accommodate for that swing. So don't be tempted to sort of shift it, because that's gonna take away the grain line and that balance that you're looking for. So even though this is going to be on a slant, you still want to make sure that the grain lines are matching up and that you're getting more of the curve this way and that you're still sticking with the parallel grain lines. I just wanted to make sure. In the past, what I've done is I just sat it on the pattern, on the fabric, because I wanted to make sure I had enough room for the fabric, and I just kind of put it on there. But it's really important that you adhere to those lines there, and then just let the skirt pattern swoop. And you do the same for the front and the back. For the back panel, you're gonna see, just want to make sure it's visible. Make sure that you're not actually incorporating the selvage in your pattern. So you might be tempted, because the back, center back is open, because you need to accommodate for that seam that you're gonna put back there, as well as the zipper towards the back. Don't cut any of the selvage. You wanna pull the pattern a little bit away and make sure that you don't incorporate any of the selvage into your design. So that's important, because you don't want that raw edge to be, well, that closed edge to be in your design, because it's not going to match. And it also usually has like markings or little holes or something. So you always want to pull the fabric a little bit away and then cut your center back line, which should also have within the pattern about, for full size, about 1 inch, and for half scale, it's a little bit small. I usually use like a 1/2 inch, but you also want to just make sure that you've incorporated that within your pattern, because if you just cut and it's not inside of it, it's going to be off a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure you guys knew, incorporate that extra inch that you're going to need for your seam allowance to the back in your pattern, and to move your pattern away from the selvage line, or just cut it off before you even start, and that way you're not tempted to cut within the selvage.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Videos are uploaded weekly covering dressmaking, fashion, lectures, and more.